very excited to have the group that we have here gathered. Here, one second. Whoops, going the wrong way here. So, as I shared with you, you kind of get the feeling of what we feel about the companies and what this group of companies is doing in our economy and for the region. Each of these individuals, we're going to start with Dr. Sueda. And so with Dr. Sueda, what we did, and I see Dean Shinneker's here, Tim back there from SIUE, was at a meeting with him. This would have been probably 2021. One of our Archford employees was working with SIUE on their Archford Angel project, and we started talking about the importance of these companies in the region. And I said, I'd love to do a study on this. There was a study done that was worldwide by KPMG, and I said, what if we did something different and we dropped a pin in St. Louis and we took a 150-mile radius and we examined those companies and we're able to get real data. And he's like, I've got the person in the business school that you should be working with on this project, and she has been absolutely wonderful. This has been over 5,000 surveys were sent out, 5% response rate, incredible work. So I want to turn it over to her.
Good morning. Okay.
That's fine.
I'm just used to talking out loud.
Okay.
I'm used to teaching, and can everybody hear me? Awesome. Okay. So before I actually get started, could we just give a round of applause to Jim and the Archford group for all of the hard work? So there was a lot of work that went into putting this on, and Jim has been great to work with. When Tim first told me about this project, I jumped on it because my research in the past has looked at what entrepreneurs do, their motivation to start businesses, their motivation to start growth-oriented businesses versus lifestyle businesses. And so when I heard about this study that Jim wanted to do, I just jumped on it because it was a natural partner to my research questions. What are the intentions and the motivations for people to transition their business successfully or to give their business or sell their business to their employees or whatnot. So the purpose of the study was essentially to create a baseline understanding of business owners in this area. And the goal was essentially to provide insights to business owners and advisors to business owners. So we looked at a variety of things such as, was there an existence of a written transition plan? What phase in the business life cycle are the business owners in? And for family businesses, is there an existence of a family readiness to transition plan? So I'm going to talk to you just about the methodology a little bit and some of the demographics that we saw and some of the interesting statistics. So essentially what we did was to start the process, we looked at prior scholarly work that was done, prior work that was done in an applied setting so that we could understand if the questions we were going to ask were theoretically sound. And then we conducted a focus group with a number of advisors to business owners, a number of service providers. We had an attorney, a CPA, a business coach, a money person. And the reason we did this was because we wanted to understand if there were any nuances that we needed to be aware of business owners that are in this region. After that, we conducted actually 2 pilot tests to make sure that the questions we were asking were being understood the way we wanted them to be. We ended up creating a survey with 49 questions that encompassed understanding the owner and the company demographics, what the current transition plan was that owners had in place, any thoughts they had about transitioning their business, We wanted to understand the relationships that business owners have to their trusted advisors. And then we also wanted to understand owner and family readiness to transition a business. So some of the things that we found, or what did we do? We invited over 5,000 people to participate in this survey. We looked at business owners, or we invited business owners within a 150-mile radius of St. Louis. We got a 5% response rate, and that may, for some of you, may not sound like a lot, but if you're in social sciences, that's a big response rate. And that's, to me, that's a testament to the business owners in this region. It says to me that business owners in this area want to learn and want to be a part of that information that's being gathered. Out of that 5% response rate, we were able to use a little over 200 surveys. And that was because we needed surveys that were completed by the business owner and that were complete. Some of the things that we found, the average age of our business owners in this area were about 57 years old. Interestingly though, about 50% of the survey respondents were in the baby boomer generation. So as Jim was saying earlier, what does this mean going forward for the area? Another, I think, a testament to the business owners in this area and to their fortitude, to their grit, to their resiliency, is that 40% of the business owners have been in business for, I think, over 30 years. And there's not a whole lot of public companies that can have this bragging right. So again, talk to you just briefly about some of the areas where we outpace the national average. So in this area, the business owners in this area have businesses that create employment 3% more than the national average. Business owners and women business owners also outpace the national average in terms of creating employment-producing companies. Again, going back to this longevity idea, the business longevity, 70% of the businesses in this area have been in business for over 15 years. And the family businesses in this area are also beating the national average in that they have passed this business down onto third or more generations. This is 4% greater than what the national average does. What I want to just leave you with here is that Warren Buffett said, risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. And I want to add to that. Not knowing what you're doing comes from not knowing what your goal is, not knowing where you want to end up. And companies, business owners can be in kind of two camps, right? We can be growth-oriented businesses where we're looking to grow that business and maybe sell the business, see it as an asset, as an investment to cash in on. And that asset, that investment, that's going to fund our retirement. Other business owners may see their business as their baby. It's as much a part of them as their right arm or their left arm and their legs are. And rather than that asset funding their retirement will probably signal the end of their business. So you have to know what camp you're in. You have to know where you're going. You have to know what your goal is. And when you understand what your goal is, then you understand what you need to do. And all of those decisions, the way you engage in your strategic business decisions, your growth decisions, your innovation decisions, all have to be in alignment with the path that you're on as a business owner. So with that, I want to pass it on to Brent McClure, who's going to talk to you about the transition teams.
Thank you, Dr. Sueda. Boy, it's a rarity that I get such a great view, and the participants have to look up here, so this is great. I'm Brent McClure. I'm a tax partner and certified exit planning advisor with Anders CPA here in St. Louis. I'm going to talk a little bit about the survey and some pointed questions in relation to the business owner transition team. Business owners rely on various teams to assume certain roles. Oftentimes we see a board of directors out there who helps with governance and strategic direction. Advisory boards oftentimes fill knowledge gaps in the organization growth and assistance with achieving the company goals. A transition team is really a group of people with unique capabilities and expertise and resources to help owners create and build what we call the 3 keys to successful business: higher value companies, personal financial plans, and help with aligning personal and professional goals. First, the question was posed to those business owners: who is on your transition team? No surprise, the top 3 consultants were corporate attorney, a business partner, and the CPA. Coming in a close fourth was the spouse. My spouse mentioned that I shouldn't say anything about the spouses not coming in, win, place, or show. One interesting point was that only 30% said financial advisors. To me, that seemed awful low. As we often mention discussing 3 keys to the successful business transition plan, financial planning should be an important part of a business owner's transition goals. And a mere 12% said an exit planning advisor is on their team. Next, a comparison between those with a written business plan and those without a written business plan. Who should be on your transition team? Again, no surprise, attorney, CPA, and business partner. Interesting point on this question, the role of an advisory board. As we see, those without a plan did not see the importance of an advisory board on their transition team. Next, the question on education. This leads to the quote we saw earlier from Ben Franklin that said the greatest way to impact the future is through education and communication. Here's where both those with and without a written plan value the CPA and the attorney the highest. However, a few things stood out to me on this question. Again, where's a financial advisor? Part of the 3 keys of a successful business plan, again, is personal financial planning. And financial advisors can assist with the education and on the value of transitioning the business, and if that fits with the personal financial goals of the business owner. Education from peers was extremely low. In my opinion, why wouldn't you go out to your peers, to the folks in the marketplace, the folks in the industry, or those that have gone through a transition plan and gained some educational information? Note that some of the people on the transition team are not on the list of those that provide education. So why do business advisors need a relationship with trusted advisors? In one of the first paragraphs of the survey overview, and what Dr. Sweda just mentioned, Warren Buffett says, risk comes from not knowing what you are doing. So what do we know about business owners? Well, we know a couple things. First, most U.S. business owners are non-employee or small employer firms. Business owners are typically running a business that supports their lifestyle and serves to replace the wages they had as an employee. Finding time to do much more than run the business for those business owners is a challenge. Owners need to be the jack of all trades, but are likely only experts at managing their business operations and not adept at business transition planning. Trusted advisors provide crucial evidence and resources necessary for business success. Regardless of whether the owners had a written plan, they all saw their corporate attorneys and certified public accountants as the top 2 advisors. We also found out business owners recognize advisors, such as exit planning advisors, financial advisors, and other advisors as valuable resources for understanding how to transition their business. The number of owners who identified exit planning consultants as part of their top advising team recognized them as valuable resources of education and knowledge. Again, this shows that trusted advisors provide crucial expertise and resources necessary for the business success. With that, I'd like to introduce Mark Boldenberg, to discuss the topic of family business.
Good morning, everybody. First thing I'm going to do is take that picture off the mirror. Right? So most of the businesses we represent are family own businesses. If they're, if you're not a Fortune 500 company and you're not, so many of the businesses that Jim Mayer and I and Brett represent are family-owned businesses. And while we're talking about that, I'm going to briefly talk about Jim Mayer and his vision for his business and his transition of it with his outstanding sons that he's got. JD, his top son, is a graduate of the University of Missouri Law School. Guess he couldn't get in Illinois, Jim. That's okay. And he's studying to be an expert in philanthropy in Indiana. So he's going to come into the plan eventually. And then, of course, we got to mention Jack. Somebody's got to mention Jack Mayer, #1 draft pick of the Nashville Soccer Club, Adidas Award winner in soccer. Stand up, Jack. Let everybody see you. This is a superstar athlete, and he's going to be part of the team in the future. So when you start with a family business, I think it's important to identify who's the family and what's their role. Are they actively involved in the business? Like Brent said, are they the spouse? The spouse may not be involved in the business, but it's still a family-owned business because the husband's there, the husband or wife are there. Could be the wife owns the business. Spouse could be the husband or wife. They're invested in their spouse being so dedicated to the growth of the business. Who are the family members? Which ones we see frequently? We've got members of the family that are involved in the business and have different roles. One's the leader of the family, one client, the other one's working out in the warehouse, but they're all part of the family. What's their role? And what about the non-family members and how do we treat them? And then throw in the spouses of the family members because they're part of the dynamic. So it starts off by defining who is the family and what's their role. And once you do that, I'm not going to follow these slides very well, but that's okay. And then you talk about the transition of the business. And when we start talking to business owners about how do you transition your business, well, there's 3 primary ways to come up. They come up. One is sell it to an outside party. If you have family members, how does that impact them? What are they going to do? What's their role in the new business? Do they have a role? Maybe they sell the business and now that it's not family owned anymore, but the buyer of the business says, yeah, but the son or daughter's got to work in the business. So sell it to an outsider. 2 is sell it to your employees, either as in an ESOP or to a group of key employees. And the 3rd is to transition it down to your family. And so that involves the purpose of having a plan, educating, and communicating, like Ben Franklin said. We're fortunate enough to represent a phenomenal business that's in the 8th generation of the business. They have members of the business that are all over the country that still have a little piece of this business, and they have people that are active in the business. And they've done it through, how do they do it? They've done it through communication, regular meetings of everybody, tremendous value in the brand name of the business. And that business may never sell, but it's transitioning from great-grandpa to grandpa and down. Hopefully you've gone to their place and picked peaches sometime in the season because they're really good at that. So a couple things that I do want to bring up from the survey, if I can get it to move, but I'm not doing too well. So, am I pointing it the wrong way? Anyway, Jacob, there's the star. Nothing can happen without Jacob. Okay, that's good. Jacob calls this the, if you can't read this, Jim Mayer's got a vision center set out in the lobby. So this shows the difference between and how much, what happens if you have a plan, what happens if you don't have a plan. And we can't talk about all of this, but remember that sometimes these conversations are not easy conversations to have. Whether it's a sense of entitlement, which is always an issue that you have to deal with, or a sense of jealousy, which is something you sometimes have to deal with in a family. that you deal with, but you have to have a plan. And sometimes you need to have these communications early and planning early. The alternative is there's no plan and the business owner dies, and then we've got a really more difficult situation to deal with. So a couple things that struck out to me on this were the treatment of family members and treatment of treatment of family members in the business and treatment of family members not in the business. As Jim said, you're going to have to study and look at that. We've got a limited amount of time, so I want to go over that. So communication, it's all about communication and planning. Now, how do you communicate? Well, communicating is really storytelling. There's a TED Talk, a whole series of TED Talks that tells about the most successful people in our country were successful by storytelling. How do lawyers win trials? They go into trial. They're the best storyteller in the trial. And the benefit of working with families is you have a closer knit group of people that you communicate with. You can inspire them with your communication. You can give them confidence and security, which is important. You can help them set goals and use the goals to motivate them. You can educate them. You can sell them on the vision and the plan that the leaders come about. And most of all, you can try and entertain them as part of this. And one of the benefits we as lawyers get in working with a family business is we can become like a trusted advisor, like Brent said, but we can also become an adjunct member of that family in helping them work through this transition. And for a lawyer, that's really gratifying when you can work with somebody, the person across the desk from you is something more than $275 an hour. That's all it is. I got an hour, $270. You become more invested in the business, and that gives you a lot more gratification than sending out your bill and collecting your fees. So again, I want to thank Jim again for this opportunity. He is a visionary. He's an avid, voracious reader, and a wealth of knowledge. And so if you don't know Jim Mayer, make sure you get up and talk to him for a few minutes today. He's a great asset to our business community and his clients. I think that's it. And I'm going to pass it on to Mr. Ron Burgess.
Next, I'd like to introduce you to Greg Wynn. Greg was a client of Archford Consulting, and he has some wonderful stories, and he's actually exited an organization. So we're going to bring him up and just kind of start with a couple of questions to ask him. Then we're going to give it back to Jim to ask them, and be thinking about what you might want to ask this panel based on our short presentations, what you want to hear about. But go take those the sessions later on. They'll have more details on everything we talked about. Greg?
Other strategic planning that you're going to be doing. I recently started another business.
Thank you guys, and thank everyone for staying on track and to get this many panelists on. We wanted to have plenty of time for questions. And again, just to highlight, Ron Burgess is probably one of the only people in the room that's done a public company's raise, sold a public company, and he's done over 200 private transactions with banks, acquisitions of banks, and roll up its regions in our footprint today. But he's done a lot of work with companies, smaller companies. Dr. Gloria Sueda on the study. If there's other items that are of interest in that piece, Mark on the family part of the business, as far as those difficult sometimes conversations or how that starts. In that, Brent on the transition team, as far as establishing that team around you, how you put that together, and then not only doing it once, but doing it twice. And so to start, Greg, I'd throw out a question to you on, as you were laying out the groundwork for Fabco in this second go around, what were some of the initial thoughts, and what was the difference in the timing in putting it together versus Wire Basket Tray, your first company? Guys, folks, I got to tell you too, this guy's being extremely modest. that little startup company in 2008 ended up doing business with Amazon, Facebook, and everything like that, and created miles and miles of wire basket tray for those companies. He took a product that had been around for years and created patents around it so that there wouldn't be stress points on the wires. It was brilliant work, so kudos.
I don't mean to cut you off. Go ahead. The fab coat, what we do now is we fabricate and a lot of that goes to the cable tray industry. A lot of that goes to my old company. But the point that I made as I was wrapping up there, in terms of not feeling that same passion and fire, it was just a comfort factor. It really was, in terms of knowing that I've done this before, and I know what I'm doing in this case. We saw a need in the marketplace for powder coating, as sexy as that is, in this area, in this territory. And it's the same thing we did. Jim mentioned about the success I had in cable tray, which is not exactly the most fascinating product, but we did okay with it. And we took that same analogy and the same benefits on the cable tray, and we turned that into powder coating. And as unsexy as cable tray is, and as unsexy as powder coating can be, we created differentiation. We created features and benefits that were saleable and tangent to our downstream customers. And so it's the same business model that we had on the cable tray side of the business. It's just transitioned to a whole new thing. And people that know me know of the culture that we had at WBT, which was extremely unique and extremely rare. I ran the company for 12 years. We had a manufacturing plant in Southern Illinois. We had a manufacturing plant in Phoenix. In those 12 years, manufacturing, engineering, sales, we lost one employee in 12 years of running the organization. And that one employee that left, sorry to get sidetracked here, was a young kid that went out to the Rocky Mountains for Thanksgiving and fell in love. And I said, look, you're never going to have this opportunity again. Go ahead and chase it. And if it doesn't work out, come back here. But that just speaks to the same environment where we're trying to do at Fabcoat, and that is valuing the employees, making them part of the team, and bringing everybody on board.
One question. Any questions out there? One question I had for Dr. Sueda was, what did you think was the most unique finding in this study?
One of the things that I thought was really interesting was when we looked at trusted advisors. So we asked the question, who are the trusted advisors? Who are your trusted advisors? And who is part of that group of people? And there was listed earlier were the CPA and the attorney. But then we also asked the question, who has helped educate you about your business and your transition planning? And it was really interesting to find the exit planning consultants were on that list, on the second list, yet not on the first list. And I found it really interesting. So even though some consultants didn't make it to, what was it, place or show, I don't do racetracks, win, place or show, but they did make it, but they were definitely being identified as people who were trusted to impart knowledge and provide education. And I found that really fascinating.
Thank you. Ron, I had a question for you as far as, are there any actions that help position a company for either a third-party sell or an internal sell?
Oh, absolutely. External sale, if you're privately owned, you may be appropriately running owner expenses through, you may be paying family members above market rate dollars, etc. Planning, getting your income statement, quote, clean, or at least getting those identified so they can be shown to a prospective buyer to show what their true seller's discretionary earning. I won't tell you what that all is, it could take me an hour, but get those clean ahead of time. Obviously, again, sell high, buy when it's low. You do if you're able to, and you at the right time, make sure your contracts, your pipeline's strong, because you don't want to be selling when your income statement is going down. The management team, man, I could talk an hour on that, and I won't, but you've got to figure out whether or not that management team has the resources to buy your organization. The employee stock ownership plan, I will reiterate, is a phenomenal opportunity. I won't steal the next session's breakout, but there are tax advantages for the owner. There's tax advantages for the prospective company that will just blow you away. But to think that you can say, okay, you know what, tonight I've just made a decision. I want to create an ESOP, and I want to transition to my employees. Nope. It's not going to happen. It really takes years of planning. So make sure the management team knows who's, and it's a wonderful way to keep them. And when a person wants an ESOP, they want that baby to continue. They want their organization to survive. It's fantastic, but it takes a long time to plan it.
Thank you. We do have a special guest over the lunch hour. He's going to pipe in from California. His name is Corey Rosen. He also has a PhD. I don't know how I run into all these doctors in my life. Psychologist, but on that. But he basically created the legislation for ESOPs. So he was a Washington Fellow back in 1975, and in 1981 he created the National Center for Employee Ownership. And so he's going to join us via video over the lunch hour, and you're going to get some great information there. Mark, I know you've done a couple of these transactions where the business owners walked away with no tax consequences, and as far as deferred tax consequences, very wanted to on ESOPs, and then.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jim.
Kudos on that.
Well, it's a team approach. I mean, the way they're able to walk away with the tax-free advantages of an ESOP is a matter where you have to have the CPA involved, you have to have the financial advisor involved, you have to have the lawyer involved. The lawyer's role is we make sure the documents are in order and that they're getting the proper advice. We have to rely on people like Brent on the tax issues, Jim on things like the ability to take the proceeds and put it in a tax-deferred, publicly traded companies, and it's like a family business works together. It's good if the trusted advisors work together also. It's really unfortunate when you can't become too vested in your own ego or your own idea, so that you won't listen to other people. You never want to put a client in a situation where they've got their trusted advisors not agreeing on something. But and Ron Burgess is absolutely right that an ESOP can be a great exit strategy, but it isn't easy, and it doesn't fit every single situation. As a matter of fact, it probably fits the minority of situations that qualify for an ESOP. But we just completed an ESOP recently where the client came in to me to update their estate plan, and he said, my plan is to sell my business to this key person that works for me. And I said, well, wait a minute. Let me introduce you to Jim Mayer, and let's talk about how an ESOP could benefit you. And a year later, maybe after that, he's going to get almost double of what he was going to sell it to his employee. But the employee that he was going to sell it to also had an ownership interest in the company. He sold his stock to the ESOP. He's happy. He's part of the leadership group coming forward. This client has walked away with a much bigger gross proceeds from his sale. And guess what? It's tax deferred, or perhaps tax eliminated if he can hold the replacement stock until he dies.
Brent, I wanted to ask you about, as you're in the middle of life, and as far as when you start thinking about the transition team, I think a lot of times, and the research shows, the attorney, the CPA, you're kind of the first person that a client may whisper that, hey, I'm 5 years out, I'm a couple of years out, but I thought these people were going to do this, or family was going to come back in, or keep key employees or something, and things change. And so as you start thinking about putting together a transition team, and working with a client from a whiteboard standpoint, how do you go about that? What are you sharing with the client? What are you trying to help them think about?
Yeah, probably the first thing is to make sure the financials are all pretty up to par. I think Jacob mentioned in his presentation that boy, if you get a willing buyer coming to ask you about possibly buying the business, they're going to wait. They want things almost immediately. So not only that, also talking a little bit about taxes and make sure the tax implications are there for the CPA. Bringing an attorney on board, making sure all the documents are in line. Sometimes we'll banter back and forth with ideas with the attorney. That's great for the client. Business partner was number 3 as well. So we want to make sure that if the business partner is interested in continuing with the business, we talk with them. And then even though I made fun of it, the spouse is also very important. I have a story with one of my partners who was going through a business transition with one of his clients, and they sat down to sign the papers. Everything was fine. All the financial plan was done. The business plans were all done. And my partner asked them, well, what are you going to do? And the business owner said, I'm building a house out in Colorado. We're going to go out there in Colorado. I'm going to fish every day. We might raise some cattle, et cetera, et cetera. And the wife looks at him and goes, the hell you are. We have grandkids here in St. Louis, and we're going to be here in St. Louis. So I think even though I said, win, place, or show, the spouse is a very important part of the business transition team.
Jim, about trusted, who's on the advisory team, and shame on me and shame on you that we haven't mentioned the importance of a financing source for the transition of the business. This ESOP didn't happen, the one we just worked on, without Lisa Fowler there being a creative, hardworking. She had a little bit of knowledge about ESOPs when we first approached her. She dug in with everything she had, brought in all her resources. That deal doesn't happen, and many business sales don't happen if you don't have a hard-working, open-minded person to provide the financing.
Yeah, it was interesting. Conference here in St. Louis recently, and Corey was at it, and I had him speak to a group of bankers in the region just to help raise the awareness of how powerful these organizations are, not only for the employees, but for the banks that are lending to them. There was a study done in 2014 that as far as foreclosing or what foreclosures on different types of businesses, it was 5%. ESOPs were 5% of the rate of other businesses going through 2008, 2009, all of that. And that's it was just pretty interesting. They're currently updating that study. Any people that you have banking relationships with or whatever, we have a copy of the 2014 study. We're happy to get that to you. We'll get you the updated study for them, because often people that work with customers or people, they're interested in doing it, but a lot of times maybe their finance committee hasn't been through that type of exercise before, so it's bringing them, making them comfortable with that type of structure. Greg, I know, speaking of speed on things, do transactions sometimes have to happen quickly?
Absolutely. In our case, when we had a suitor that stepped up on the company, it was transitioned at that point in time really to Mark and to you. But we had a definitive deadline of the 10th of February because there was a major industry conference that was happening. And I'm not going to show up and blow smoke up everybody and talk about strategic things when I know behind the surface that this is really going on. So it was an absolutely hard deadline. The acquirer said they didn't know if they could make it, and but to the point that was brought up earlier, our financials were clean, our financials were updated, we were all wrapped up in a nice pretty bow and ready to go. And the last week or so, Mark took it over the goal line. So it happened on an expedited time frame that was measured in I think about 60 to 90 days.
Yeah. And just going back to the points that they're making on your financials, knowing your books backwards and forwards, how important, and being able to normalize those numbers. We consistently, our consulting team, we just consistently hear that people don't realize that, hey, if I'm getting a 10 multiple and I'm buying a gallon of gas, through the company, and that's really personal use, that gallon of gas just cost me 10 times what I thought it cost me, and so just having that mindset that you're out in front of that. Again, any I'm going to be quiet. Hands? Yes, Liz.
Maybe on topic with the potential of a recession on the horizon. I wonder and Greg, you've been through that once. Any comments or suggestions on what business owners can do in the future?
It's going to be interesting to see what happens next year. Obviously, there's a lot of forecasting. From a business owner standpoint, we always, I only speak to myself, we always ran a very conservative ship. We always retained lots of cash within the organization to weather. We always kept the accounts flush. We always accrued for expenses. I won't say a hunker down mentality, but I was always kind of brought up in business and raised that way, that we wanted to have resources to weather any storm, whether it's something on a personal note or something more on a macro note. What we did.
I'm probably going to get shot for this. You probably will. But the question that was asked was by my partner, Liz Heller, who's been my partner been with me for well over 30 years. But that's not what I'm going to talk about. If you've not had the opportunity to meet somebody that had, forget the sex, forget the age, if you've not had an opportunity to meet somebody that holds world records on a bicycle and currently is a 2-time world champion on a cycle, that's her. So, the reason she came with us was in 1992. We were the one employer that would say, yes, we'll let you take some time off to train for the 1992 Barcelona Olympics.
Timing is everything, Liz. You asked a very good question, and there were some good answers. But depending on this economy and depending on your business, you may have to put the brakes on a sale. You've got to be flexible. You've got to be able to be fast at making changes. Being able to articulate, if you have to make the transition in a really bad downturn, you got to be able to articulate how you're going to be able to sustain it and then get back to the growth mode post-recession. But I'm going to tell you, if you're in the mode of looking at selling next year, you may want to say, do I want to get on Greg Wynn's bike and move that transaction up before something happens? Nobody's got enough crystal ball, but forecasting is really important, and having the what ifs if it does have a downturn, I highly recommend.
I have a question for you. In that situation where there is success, how often do you see the transition have a earn-out or a contingency in the purchase price going forward?
He asked earnouts or contingencies. I would say for sure. I mean, again, if you're an organization that's growing and you're getting valued off of future discounted cash flows, and people say, I'm not sure that's going to even materialize, you may have to negotiate and get strategic, and the buyer's going to sit there and say, yep, I'm willing to pay you that price, but only if you can produce those types of results. And I'm going to put money in escrow and blah, 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 blah. You're going to have to figure out whether or not you're part of the team to help make that happen going into the future. I will warn you, it's not a super fun process when you're selling an organization and people are doing due diligence on you, and they're going to look at you and say, especially on a forecast, I'm throwing the BS card out there. So you may have to negotiate. You may have to stay on for a little while. There's a lot of, again, every single transaction is different. But yeah, I would say going into the future, a potential earn-out or an escrow is probably more prevalent than going forward. And that's going to maximize your dollars, obviously. But again, the lock price, you might have to take a discounted price if somebody's worried about the next couple of years. Because the bankers are going to be looking at it. They're going to say, can you cash flow this deal? If they're leveraging it, the ROI has to be there for a buyer to take it. So it's going to be creative. Every single deal will be different.
I think it's interesting. You always think about the industry, you're in. So what's kind of the cycle that industry is in for your particular business? You think about your particular business, what industry, where are you operating? Are you still in growth phase? I hope everyone heard that 2/3 of those companies that responded are no longer growing their earnings or revenue. So that means they've missed this extra valuation, that extra multiple that would have been applied to their company. So what they're talking about is that as you're going over that edge and you're coming down, as I come down, it's a multiple of all those dollars that I'm losing. And so being prepared in what we're doing. And then we think about the overall economy. Where is the overall economy? What's their cost of capital? What's those types of things that go into it. But when you can have alignment on those three things, that's when you can walk away knowing that I did well on this exit in what I was doing. But you're not always going to get that. A lot of, you think about disease, you think about divorce, you think about a sudden death, you think about disagreement with the partnership. Those types of items knock out 62% of the businesses within 5 years.
When somebody comes to you and says, your business is very attractive, it's very profitable, you have this great cash flow, we're going to come in and pay you a handsome price to buy your business, what factors would an owner consider when he says, well, maybe now's not the right time for me to sell, I'm going to keep writing?
I think it's a lot of it, this is about having that plan. It's about knowing where you're going ultimately with that business. Our business is in a dynasty trust. And that's, we understand this is going to be a family business. It's the communication with the spouse. It's the communication. So we did the things we felt we had to do over the last 35 years to be comfortable, my wife and I, with what we want to do for the rest of our lives. But this business is it's just special to us. I mean, with the family, with the people that are in the organization. I mean, it's a fun team. It's a fun place to go and show up. And so I'm not ready to give that up at this point in my life. But I know that's okay, because the other people that are important to me and my family and everyone else around that, they know that I'm not willing to do that. And so there's always going to be these cycles. I mean, we can anticipate the rest of our lives based on our age. There's going to be every couple of years, you're going to have industry cycles, you're going to have economy cycles and everything that's going on. But a Price Waterhouse study said that 75% of the people that walked away from their business were unhappy 3 years after they sold their business. I don't want to be that guy. I want to know that when I do this, we did it for all the right reasons. If it was ever done, just, you know, but also I always want to know that I would be prepared, you know, because you have a responsibility to everyone around you. It may have been a better opportunity for all, you know, when that comes along. And I think Greg struggled with that issue. I mean, guys, you can't imagine the culture. You walk in there, I mean, he's cooking hamburgers on Friday afternoons for the people in the organization. I mean, they have competitions where they would have cook-offs. And I mean, but just, whoever said it earlier, you've been in those organizations where you walk in and the floor's clean and people look you in the eye and they're smiling and you're like, man, this is special. This is real. And so it's such a personal thing, but I hope it's not lost on Dr. Sueda's study and why this is so important to the region is we have, think in terms of a pig and a python coming through. 70% of these businesses have been in business over 15 years. 70% of the people were approaching at or past retirement age. If they don't have people coming into their organization or they don't know what they're doing, that's probably going to be a business that ends up with a very discounted value down the road because it's everyone's going to be on the market, you know, trying to sell. And so this baby boomer thing is real in this region. And I think that was one of the most jaw-dropping things. And Tim Bean, thank you so much for allowing her to take and work on this project with us, because that shocked me. That scares me as someone that's younger than that. You know, so I'm 56 and I'm looking at that and going, you got all these people in front of you that may impact the business environment in this greater region if we don't get behind helping make sure everything goes right. Sorry.
We have a small business, and we have recently been approached with a buyer. And how do you feel about if the buyer offers you that he wants to keep you on staff as an employee? So then it is a slow buyout.
I mean, we can open this up to the whole crowd, but if you want to maximize value,
Yeah, maximizing that value, you're best to stay. I'm just going to say, being the owner is being the owner. Working for a new owner really creates its own special challenges. Get to know that prospective buyer real well. I would say have cocktails with them, have coffee with them, do whatever, but make sure you know what they're expecting. And my attorney over here will tell you work out those deals real well so that any of that contingent payment stream, etc., is well defined, because definition of cause and why you're not going to get some of that buyout, I'll let him talk about.
I can't really top your answer, Ron. I think you gave a great answer. But one of the assets that businesses have is an in-place workforce. That creates value in a business. And if you're the owner, you're the head of that valuable asset called an in-place workforce. So it's not unusual for an owner, especially if they're not familiar with your business, to want you to stay in and transition, because you know the customers, you know the business. Just make sure that you, like Ron says, that you, one, get to know the person you're going to be in business with, and two, have well-written agreements. So you've got an exit strategy. Speaking of family businesses, Jim, and transition and dynasty, how is it working for your wife?
What's that?
How's it working for your wife?
She's still working with us. She's loving it. I don't know. But I thank you very much. Definitely, that's one of the reasons that we always talk about, if you're thinking about stepping away from your business, in the next 5 years, understand someone's going to want you for a couple of years if you want to maximize the value of that business. And so you have to be further out in front of this as you think about it. Guys, I do ask you again, as a friend, please put some things down as far as if you're sitting there and you're thinking to yourself, man, I know I got to be doing some planning around this. I got to start some of these conversations. If it's just, hey, it's going to be a difficult conversation. I don't want to have this with a family member. Whatever those things are, start putting them down, and then if we can stick them to these little cards, then we're going to aggregate those things and we're going to go work on them. So appreciate it very much. We're going to go on break for a little bit. Restrooms right down the hall. More food, coffee, whatever